I'm behind. I'm not even aware of it.
Oh, yeah. The Pfizer vaccine needs extremely cold storage temperatures, which experts believe would present challenges for countries with poor health systems. Many experts say the donation is crucial because the global disparity contributes to the
Two of
creation
them
of
keep
mutant
talking, but
viruses,
we're going to
as
have
well as
you
creating
off
a
in a hot
$5 trillion
second. And I
economic
thank
loss
you
for
for
advanced
being here.
economies. I'm Karen Chamas.
Yeah.
We have Pastor Brooks.
Okay, Pastor Brooks, you all can say, okay, we're up now. You can say hello to Pastor
Hi, good
Brooks,
morning.
and then I can let you all
Good
go.
morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Have a great show, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a good
You're
show.
welcome. Thank you. Love you much. All right, everybody.
Love
Hey,
you
hey,
too.
hey, we got a lot to talk about today. Pastor Brooks, how are you?
I am great, grand, and glorious.
Top European Union officials are joining calls to investigate the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, ramping up the pressure on China to be more open
Got a
about the
lot to
virus.
talk about today.
Just into his word that the Pope is refusing to accept the resignation of a German cardinal over a sex abuse scandal. A dilapidated building collapsed overnight in Mumbai, India,
And
following heavy
remember,
rain.
you're out by
At least 11 people
6:19.
were killed, others
Okay.
injured.
If I run over a little
This
bit,
is AP
just
News.
keep going, because I've got a clock.
The
I've
wife
got
of
to
the
stick to.
notorious Mexican drug kingpin
Okay.
El Chapo
You
is
mean
expected
get
to
out?
plead guilty in federal court today as part of a plea deal. Here's our Jackie Quinn.
The wife of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman faces conspiracy charges in the U.S. for allegedly helping her husband run his multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise.
It's going to
Emma
become even
Coronel
more crucial as
Ispuro
time
had
goes
previously
forward, because I'm going to
pleaded
have a
not
clock
guilty
unlocked
after being charged with
'cause I'm gonna be
conspiracy
moving to
to
another
distribute
platform.
cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin,
So,
and
that means we'll
marijuana.
be
She'd been
within 5
arrested
minutes.
earlier
It's gonna-
this
I'm
year
gonna
at a
check. I'm gonna
Washington
shorten it
area
to-
airport. Prosecutors say Coronel Ispuro
so that I
worked
can-
closely
'cause,
with
you
the
know, 5
command and
minutes,
control structure
as
of the
you well know,
Sinaloa
it's not a
cartel
record,
and
but
conspired to distribute
music
large
engages
quantities
people
of
differently.
drugs,
You know
knowing
that.
they'd be smuggled into the U.S.
You
Jackie
have
Quinn,
space
Washington.
to
A
go
nun
5,
in
6,
Los
7
Angeles
minutes
has
in
agreed to
music, but
plead guilty to
talking, unless
stealing
you're
more than
preaching, and
$800,000
which is a
to pay
musical
for a
rhythm,
gambling habit. I'm
it
Rita
just, you know,
Foley,
you gotta
AP News.
move things along.
This is
But
8:20
as a
a.m.
preacher, you get it.
WCPT
Hey,
Willow
Yolanda,
Springs, and
Carol,
streaming worldwide at
and Melissa.
WCPT820.com.
Oh my
We
goodness,
are
it's so good to see
Chicago's
everybody today.
progressive talk, where
Francis,
facts matter.
you just love Mayor Lightfoot, don't you?
Now your
Well, I do too. I like her a
WCPT820
whole
Chicago
lot.
traffic update.
Like her a whole lot. She got a
I-80 is
whole
closed
lot.
westbound from I-55 to the Manuka interchange with a
Well,
rollover
and shout out
semi.
to Chaparral. She and her
Eastbound, there's a
podcast
closure from Manuka to
got
I-55
yet
as well,
another.
with
Well, they've been
separate
nominated for
incident
another award. They're going to get
involving
another
a
one in the
semi
fall.
which
And
lost
so
a load of
I want to give her
onions.
much
They're all
love.
over
Go
the
to the
roadway.
Intercept so that you can
Expect
see this
heavier
podcast. We're going
traffic
to get her
in
to
the
call in and
area. In
talk
fact,
about
the
it.
exit
Carmelita,
from
I see
I-80
you. I
59
see
is
you. How you
backed
doing,
up, so we'll
girlie?
have some heavy traffic there
How is
in the Shorewood area
everybody?
this morning.
Buenos dias
Looking
to
at
people.
farther
And
north on the inbound Stevenson
Bom
traffic is
dia
slow.
to our
Willow Springs
Portuguese
Road to
and
the Des
Brazilian
Plaines River
brothers and
Bridge. There's
sisters.
a collision there
And hey,
blocking
hey,
the wide
hey
lane.
to everybody,
Travel
all
time
of
is
the
going up
above.
on the
Today we're going to
Stevenson.
be
It's
talking
30
about
minutes
hunger
to
in America.
355 to Lakeshore Drive.
As we're
Outbound
talking about
21.
this economic
That's
recovery,
traffic.
Pastor
I'm
Brooks,
Alamonte.
there's a disconnect between what the media are saying and what people are experiencing and living.
Which is
People are
the
still in a
right-wing
lot of
fascist party that
economic.
has taken over
People are still
Hungary,
struggling.
shut down the
Still
free
struggling. We're going
press,
to talk about that today.
imprisoned
You see it in the food banks.
people
That's
like
where you see
me,
it.
imprisoned
You see the
the
pain that people, and you're
opposition,
saying that people don't want to go
particularly
back
its
to work.
people
There's
in the
something,
media.
there's a
The
disconnect
Tom
here.
Hartman Radio
We're also going to be
program,
talking about
weekdays
election
11 a.m. to
2022.
2 p.m.
Did you
on
know that Herschel
WCPT
Walker, the football
820, where
great,
facts matter.
people are waiting to see if he and Stacey Abrams will be facing off in Georgia. We're going to be
Nothing
talking about
sounds
that.
quite
Val
like a
Dimmings,
dad's
the
day at
congresswoman, if you
Lowe's.
can bring
Like
that
the
down
DeWalt
just a
20-volt
bit,
max
Paul.
brushless drill and driver kit.
Thank you so much. We're going to be talking about Val Dimmings, the highly regarded congresswoman, former police chief out of Orlando, Florida, U.S. representative. She has now decided to launch a campaign, U.S. senatorial bid against Marco Rubio. What's the impact? And what's up with the Kamala Harris visit, Vice President Harris's visit in the south of the border, in Guatemala, in Mexico? Some people are saying that the White House was perplexed because they expected her to perform at a higher level. So, some people also said she was set up to fail. Want to know what you think about all of that? But stay right here. Stay right here. We got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show.
To talk about why rescue is best. It's all on
15 for good news and COVID Q&A. How about that?
WCPT.
Hey, Shelby.
This is
I wonder if,
WCPT
are you my
820,
Shelby from
where
Howard?
facts matter.
Carol from the left coast, Andre.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Oh, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, is my home, as is AM 950 Radio. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, my love to all, and meet my global family over here on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. You can see Francis and Carol from the West Coast, and Carmelita and Andre. And Linear Bob from San Jose, California. He's been looking at the solar eclipse. Gorgeous, everybody. Yolanda, Melissa, hey. Francis, who is loving our mayor here in Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. I see you, girl. Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. I love you all, Hannah and Vicky and everybody. Please like and share, everybody. All of my Santita Jackson Morning Stars, like and share. And please go to my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel, and like and subscribe. And you can look over there. Some people actually like the feed over there better. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278 is my number. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. Got a lot to talk about today. Some people have been saying that Kamala Harris's trip south of the border was not as successful as they wanted it to be. And some of the headlines say that she was set up to fail. Immigration is like one of the third rails of American political life. Who wants to touch it? Who can succeed? And when she got the assignment, you could see her kind of distancing herself from it. No, it's been put in her lap. What will she do with it? How did she do with it? Lester Holt pushed. And, let's talk about that. History's been made, but now what's the encore? And we're going to be talking about election 2022. That's what this is really all a part of. Val Demings, highly regarded congressman out of Florida, former police chief. She has decided, and she's made it official. She's running against Marco Rubio. Does she have a shot? Some people say that she does. Remember, then Vice President Biden considered her to be his vice presidential running mate. She is someone who is really a big star on the rise in the Democratic Party. And did you know that Herschel Walker, yes, the football great, everyone's waiting to see if he and Stacey Abrams will be facing off in Georgia. What do you think about that? Some people are saying that he could be a comer. Election 22 is what is on the table for the Santita Jackson Show today. And of course, Dr. Max Wolf and I will be talking about the economic recovery as we look at it through the eyes of hunger in America. Hunger. I mean, the fact is, more and more food pantries are giving out more and more food as we're talking about an economic recovery. Does that match up to you? Well, we got a lot to talk about, and then of course, COVID-19 Q&A with Dr. Deborah Verholden. Let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to the good news with Pastor Darius Brooks. Chicago, well north of 80 degrees today. That is what they're saying. Partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's an excessive heat advisory. My brothers and sisters up there, so please take care of each other. Make sure you get water. Try and stay indoors. Try and stay cool. And check on your neighbors, whatever their ages, but particularly our elderly. Check on them today because there's an excessive heat advisory because you're expecting a high of 98 degrees. It will be mostly sunny. It will be hot in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The Dow closed down 152 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 13 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 7 points. Oh, boy. We're in the throes of the summer, everybody. You going out to the games, the baseball games? Well, guess what? The Yankees were triumphant over our Twins, 9-6. They're going to be facing off tonight. Maybe they will be able to vindicate themselves. The Cubs were triumphant over the Padres, 3-1. And, well, the Blue Jays bested the Sox, 6-2. They will be facing off once again today. NBA playoffs, boy oh boy, the Suns 123, the Nuggets 98. The Bucks will be facing off against the Nets today, and so will the Clippers and the Jazz. President Biden is overseas. This is his first overseas trip. He meets today with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson as part of his first foreign trip since taking office. Two are expected to talk about lifting travel restrictions between the United States and the UK in place to stop the spread of COVID-19. They're also expected to agree on a new Atlantic Charter, updating the historic declaration from the Second World War by FDR and Winston Churchill, outlining their shared goals after World War II. Up next on President Biden's agenda, defending democracy, restoring American alliances in Europe, and speaking his mind in next week's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The big priority for U.S. officials right now is getting everyone vaccinated, getting everyone the shots at home and abroad. Beyond supporting incentives for Americans to get the shots, the Biden administration plans to do, get this, guess what? Donate 500 million doses. That's a 500 million doses to Pfizer's vaccine worldwide. The U.S. vaccination rate, though, is slowing. States are reporting that they have Johnson & Johnson vaccines set to expire before they'll get used. And J&J and federal officials are looking at whether the shelf life can be extended or the doses can be put to other use. Don't have to ask Dr. Deb about that. What about expired doses? Would you take them? Would you take them for something else? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show, because that sounds a little risky. But after years of stops and starts, everybody, the Keystone XL pipeline is officially dead. That's right. The developer announced it is pulling the plug on the controversial project after the Biden administration revoked its permit in January. Has Oxford University canceled the Queen? Yeah. Oxford University is comprised of many different colleges within the university. Well, guess what? One of the most prestigious colleges voted to remove a photo of Queen Elizabeth, the reigning monarch, from their common room, citing Britain's colonial history, that a move that touched off the latest flashpoint in the UK's culture wars. The decision triggered condemnation from the right and threats against educators, and it stirred widespread controversy on social media. People on the right in the UK, by the way, accuse people on the left of being socialists. Okay, and that would be, quite frankly, the royal family. If you watch The Crown, you see that people who wanted to fight against the monarchy are considered to be socialists. Something is not quite right, and Dr. Anthony Fauci is really dealing with a lot of controversy about these emails and about the gain of function. That is to say, where did this COVID-19 come from, and did it originate in the labs? People are really trying to talk about that and trying to tease that out. Well, he had an interview with Chuck Todd on MSNBC's NTP Daily, and he said, I don't have a clue about all of this controversy. I don't have a clue about what they're talking about. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a pejorative against a United States Senator. That's right, Senator Marsha Blackburn, who floated a conspiracy theory, or at least a theory. You know how I feel about that the infectious disease expert was colluding with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg on a narrative about COVID-19. There's a lot going on, everybody, and he is furious about it. He said, when you're attacking me, basically, you're attacking science. Oh, it's a lot to talk about, everybody. And then we're seeing a slightly elevated risk of bleeding disorders after the AstraZeneca vaccine. And UFOs. I wish I had some scary music to play. Repeatedly took offline U.S. nuclear capabilities, according to an ex-chief of a secret unit at the Pentagon. Wow, do you think that's what's going on with this global glitch where swaths of the internet are going down after the cloud outage? Maybe. I don't know. Do you think we're alone out there? Or do you think there's some other beings out there? Let's talk about it. I want some good news. The pastor of Grace Central Church. Talk to us, Pastor Darius Brooks.
Good morning, Santita. Good morning. Listen, I got to run on. I do got some good news. Nehemiah 8 and 10. Santita, I study the Word of God like a dictionary, like a textbook. I got to make this thing interesting. I study the Word of God like music. Music is a universal language. But if you are a believer, the Word of God is what we do. It's how we live, not because of, but in spite of, and everything we do, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, socially, culturally, verbally, sexually, professionally, personally, everything we do, we ask God for direction on how to do this thing. Ain't that crazy amazing? Nehemiah 8 and 10 says, go and celebrate with a feast of rich food and sweet drink. Now, of course, he's talking about the Word of God here. And once you get the Word of God, he says, and share gifts of food and people who have nothing prepared, which means take this good stuff that God give us, my God, I'm about to run, and be able to prepare yourself to give it to somebody else. He says, this a sacred day before the Lord, which means, I know they talk about 18 and 20 and all the stuff that happens, but this sacred day before the Lord is what he's talking about is today. Right now, WRAC, right now. And he says, well, I'm going to get excited. He says, don't be dejected and sad, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Santita, if I had to use a thought for today, I don't know who I'm talking to. Yes, I do. I'm talking to you and whoever listening to me. Regain and keep your joy. Regain and keep your joy. You want to partner with God so that his direction can assist you in every area of your life. Everything you need is in the Word of God, from love stories to murders, families, brothers and sisters. Yes, sir. And in and through God's Word, he won't let you get into weights or things that's just too heavy for you. There are some people, places, and things that you get into that the weight of that thing alone stops your joy. I'm about to run up out of here. The less you really know about God, his word, the less happy you will be. But the more you understand God and that he has a plan, first for us as individuals, and then he has a plan for us to make sure we do what we do. Santita, we have a will, and we should not die without being happy. But our will should be in his will, because his will is how he peacocks this whole thing and put the colors where it needs to be. So at the end of the day, the picture is perfect. So we take our will, and we put it in his will, and that's how this thing works. But when you know God's word, his word, girl, let me debunk some myths. When you know what God has done, when you know how he's forgiven you, when you know his goodness, his mercy, his truth, his grace, when you know that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein, and most importantly, I'm going to run, Santita, when you know God's sovereignty, he can do what he wants when he want to do it. You can't let, or you cannot avoid and allow the joy of God's word to lead you, for he has a plan for all of our lives. You have to regain and keep your joy. God has a promise. With God, it's always an exclamation. Without God, it's always an exclamation. With him, you got to regain and keep your joy. I don't know who I'm talking to. Yes, I do. I'm talking to you. Make sure God is your source, and then work it.
Me, because God can do anything but fail.
What?
And and for our brothers and sisters, I'm sensitive to the fact, everyone is not Christian. Everyone is not a believer. And I want you to know it is
Exactly.
okay. That having been said, I hope that this good news segment will give you something that will give you it will give you hope. A lot of people are struggling with a whole lot, and I respect that, because I've got brothers and sisters who are animists, who are atheists, who are agnostic. I have brothers and sisters who are of different faiths than I. And I appreciate and embrace that. You don't have to embrace what I embrace. I just hope that the people that I'm bringing before you, and I plan to bring even more people of different belief systems before you, I hope that they will give you the joy that you hear in Pastor Darius Brooks. When he's had his most down moments, I've always heard this joy that cannot be contained coming from him. And we're going to have him come on the show one day and just give his testimony about things that the family that he created with his wife is not the family he grew up in. I'll just leave it right there.
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let me just add, I know it's 6:19, but let me share something with you. You are right, because watch this. When we don't believe God's word, which is what his word is, we're not a believer. We're just like an atheist. Yes, sir. If you think education is expensive, you just try ignorance. Not believe. You got to believe in something. You can't not believe in it. And then something you got to believe in. But whatever you believe in should be able to help you and assist you and making sure that you never in life lose your joy. Okay, girl, I'm going. I got to focus for shout.
I love this man. I love him because he is unstoppable, victorious, as the Sounds of Blackness say. Blessings to you. I love you. Let me bring on Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. We love you so much. I had a question for you, but it was, I've been hearing about these expiring doses of the J&J jab. I love alliteration, J jab. And JJ Jab. And I'm trying to.
Sounds like a group, like a singing group. JJ Jab.
JJ Jab. So they're trying to find out if they will be able to use the JJ Jab beyond its expiration date. Will it be effective as a vaccine? Number one. Number two, they're saying, maybe if they expire, we can't let a good medicine go to waste. Maybe we can use it for something else. What do you think about that?
First of all, if people get over the hurdle, mind you, now we're dealing with, at this point, the people who are unvaccinated typically are people who are like, still need to wait and see, or they're a no. I don't think we are at the phase where we've got people who are a clear yes and don't have access. We don't have an access problem. So with this group, it's even more important that they get the best of the best of the best, right? In the same way, remember back earlier in the pandemic when we were rationing doses, and all of a sudden when we had been given this very robust clinical protocol, you got to get one dose, and then if you get the Pfizer, you got to get another one 3 weeks later, and you got to get this one 4 weeks later, and all of that. And then they try to do a quick switch change. So, as long as we can just get at least one dose in everybody, that's better than nothing. And I was upset. Remember, my second dose appointment got canceled. And I literally felt betrayed. I was upset because my thing is I did not make this decision and do this so that I could get partial effectiveness. I weighed it all out, but I wasn't weighing out, one dose of a 2-dose vaccine compared to being unvaccinated. If they had said you're only going to get one dose and that's only going to give you 30, 40, 50% protection, I might have been a no. So for people that are now in this half of our population who remain either on the fence or clearly on the no side of the fence, we owe them better than to give them expired vaccines. If they have a vaccine that's expiring, I have 2 suggestions. Number one, they need to be doing clinical trials on that, right? Test the effectiveness, because guess what? We're going to be going through this for probably ever. COVID is now just with us. It's with us. So the same way you get that seasonal flu vaccine, predictably, you will be getting a seasonal COVID booster. Okay, so there are some questions that we need to answer. We should not be answering those questions, especially in the population of unvaccinated people now. If it doesn't work well, we will then have this group of unvaccinated people who have, moved over and become a yes, and we'll see more breakthrough cases in that group potentially. So that's a bad idea. But how about an even better idea would be, well before those vaccines expire, why aren't we being a good steward of the resources and shipping them abroad? The JJ jab would be a game changer in so many countries who don't have its one dose. Would be a game changer in places that don't have access the way that we have. That their supply-demand problem is going the other way. They've got many more people who want it than they do doses. This is the time for good stewardship, not the time for us to be, trying to, change the game up and hoard our resources for ourselves. So I think that's what we need to be looking at, not giving people expired doses. And expiration dates are an interesting thing. We've all had a carton of milk that said Tuesday, and we drink it on Friday. I know I personally had, medication that I hadn't even checked the expiration date. In my house, medication sits in, we had these 2 tubs, and it sits in these 2 little tubs, and the tubs are actually on top of the refrigerator. They used to be in the cabinet because having them in the bathroom, people weren't taking them. Our vitamins are in there. So we have one of sort of holistic kind of things, and one that's like allergy meds and headache medicine and things like that. And I've, taken an allergy pill, for example, because allergy season comes around. I hadn't taken them since the year before during allergy season. And I'll, 3 or 4 days later, check the back and say, oh man, this expired 2 months ago. And I'll still take them. But that's very different than giving somebody an expired vaccine, especially a vaccine that has storage requirements. So I think that's a bad idea. And if we got a month, if you got all these doses expiring in a month, can we get those to some of the most underserved parts of the country? What a act of good stewardship that would be.
I just saw a report this morning on television. I got about a minute left for you, Dr. Deb. I mean, and people, you've got India, you've got Uganda, you've got a lot of places where a lot of people really, really want to take these shots, and to let them sit here and expire. I hear you. It's like, that's irresponsible. And it's greedy. Greedy. It's greedy. It's greedy. It's greedy. And if we're going to talk about being leaders on the world stage, I've got about 30 seconds for you. What should we do? Particularly since the president has very generously agreed to give Pfizer some money for 500 million jabs, right? And they're going to send them
1 minute.
get part of the United Nations project, COVAX, to get these vaccines all over the world. What should we be doing? 30 seconds are yours.
Yeah, we already have a global community of people who've elevated the cause for global equity in vaccine distribution and administration. We need to jump both feet in to that effort and be good stewards of the resources that we have and get these doses while they're still good. Because I also don't think we should be giving expired or almost
30
expired doses to our global partners and our global brothers and sisters. That is the action that we need to be taking. If they want to keep some to the side and do some clinical trials testing, that's fine. But how hard is it going to be to get people in a clinical trial for the vaccine who are unvaccinated at this point in time? That's going to be a real heavy lift as well. It's time for good global stewardship. That's what's needed here.
Dr. Deborah Furholden, brilliant epidemiologist, and she's part of the family here on the Santita Jackson Show. Talking about election 2020 in a hot second. What is happening in Georgia? What is happening in Florida? What's happening in Minnesota? What's happening in Chicago, Illinois, the state of Illinois? What's happening all around the country? I tell you what, the elections are coming up. Warnock is vulnerable. That's what they're saying. We got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Oh, Dr. Deb. Yay.
Good morning.
All right, girl, I love it. Love it, girl. What's going on? When I saw that, I said, oh, I got to ask her about this. I literally just saw that. I was getting the last few headlines before I came on the air, and I said, oh, wow, I got to ask her about this. Because I'm really trying to get in the
Well, here's the thing. You think about it. Ask yourself, if right now you said, okay, I'm ready, I'm going to go get my JJ jab, and you go to get one, it makes me think of JJ Fad. JJ Fad. Remember JJ
Fad?
Fad?
Crazy. I'm sorry, but I just
don't. The boy band. There's JJ Fad, the girl group, and then there's JJ Jab. And they all come out and do like a little jab. Like, hey, we're JJ Jab. But imagine you make that choice and then you go. And mind you, every vaccine, you get the batch number and everything on your card. And you can go and Google that and you can see where it came from and all that. Imagine you get yours and realize that you didn't got an expired vaccine. You would be livid. you would be livid because even the sense of security around what the vaccine provides, if you found out that you had gotten an expired vaccine, you wouldn't even have that sense of security. And we don't know. You might have protection. Yeah. But just the fact that you had made the choice and don't have the peace of mind of saying, okay, well, I did it. I've got some protection. And then look, they said if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear your mask. You don't have to do this. Back to business as usual. But then, in fact, possibly for some people, that's not quite the case. It's too slippery of a slope. We need to share in the resources. It's like why
we have Attorney Patillo.
They say Americans throw away 25% of our food. 25% of the food that we buy goes in the trash, and you think there are people starving to death, all across the world.
And here,
people start, right here.
What do you do it? I mean, just if you can't sell the food, then turn it over. Oh, that's going to incentivize people not to pay for food. You know what? My pastor, God bless you, Reverend Clay Evans. There's so many things that man would say that I keep with me every day. He said, "I've never seen God make a mouth he couldn't feed." How can you be this greedy? And I've heard Reverend Otis Moss Jr., Pastor Otis Moss III's father, who is one of the most profound preachers and one of Dr. King's favorite preachers. And my father said, if I preceded him in death, I wanted him to preach my funeral. That's Reverend Moss. Reverend Moss said, God will supply your every need, not your every greed.
Yeah.
We got to do better than this, everybody. Much better. This is like, this is no, we can't do this. People need these shots. Get them to them. So let's do it. Get them to them. And I hear you, Deb. I'm like, come on. Why is that so hard? I've got Robert Patillo. Crazy Robert is with you.
Hey, riding with Robert in the morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Hi, Attorney Patillo.
Good morning.
The crazy one is here. Yes. The one who is going to take out the MAGA people. Girl, he had this crazy response for these people. I said, Lord. What is he going to do? Oh, but he's so brilliant. And so are you, Dr. Deb. But we're talking about, Deb. We're talking about election 2022. What? There are a lot of things going on. You've got Herschel Walker, the NFL and college great running back. He might run. They say that he might be able to give Stacey Abrams a run for her money. You've got Val Demings running up against Marco Rubio. You've got Warnock, who is vulnerable. There's just a lot of stuff that's up in the air. And the election season is here, everybody. People need to start getting registered to vote.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. I want to hear your voices today. I want to hear your voices. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. You can text me at that number as well, GWC Injury Lawyers. Thank you very much for that. And I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and got my global community. I saw you, Vanderlei, down there in Brazil. Barbara Bacon from Oak Park, D. Ray, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, and Lorraine. She and Mark's son Nigel just graduated from high school. They're just like the perfect looking family too. They are some of the prettiest people I've ever seen in my life, but they have raised some beautiful children, and congratulations to you, Nigel, my sweet. Everybody, let's talk about 2022, excuse me. I know President Trump is still talking about 2020, but he's also talking about 2022 and 2024. We are now really, we're just a little more than a year away from, we're a year away from the primaries and all of that with 2022. Are you getting registered to vote? As your options for voting are being shut down on you all across the country. And what are the key races? that we should be looking toward. Will Stacey Abrams run? Will Herschel Walker, yes, that Herschel Walker, the running back, the Hall of Famer, the great college running back, the great NFL running back, will he run against her? What about Warnock, Senator Raphael Warnock? Is he vulnerable? Val Demings, does she have a shot against Marco Rubio in Florida? What is happening? What is happening all around the country? Of course, you've got Robert Patillo, a Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, but he is also, we're going to be joined by Aaron Connolly, attorney Aaron Connolly, in just a few minutes. But he is also the host of his own radio show. It is one of the best radio shows I've ever heard. It is on Sundays from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time on WAOK out of Atlanta. But you know what? It's a global community now. Tell all your friends about Robert Patillo's show. Robert Patillo, talk to me. We got a lot on the table. Where do you want to begin? Do you want to begin with Georgia? Because, everybody wants, we all want to see Stacey Abrams have a rematch with Brian Kemp. We want to see it, but Herschel Walker might stand in the way. Talk to me.
Well, Georgia's interesting. So Herschel Walker is being floated for the Senate seat to run against Warnock in 2022. So they did a straw poll at the Georgia GOP convention last weekend, where Herschel Walker got about 30% of the vote. Kelvin King, another African American gentleman and businessman, got about 22%, and then other candidates, such as Gary Black, the agricultural commissioner, got about 10%, and then filtering there on down. So if Herschel Walker did decide to run for that Senate seat, right now he will be odds-on favorite to be the Republican nominee to face off against Warnock in 2022. He was a University of Georgia running back. He's a big friend of Donald Trump, who's really pushing him to run. And because you have the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, many centrist Republicans are having a difficult time running a traditional Republican campaign, because you have to mollify the MAGA crowd, which makes it difficult to talk about, regular Republican stuff, tax cuts, faith, family, God, guns, those sorts of things. You have to talk about the 2020 election. You have to talk about the liberals, stealing, all those sorts of things. So it's really created a schism within the party. So more than likely, it's not going to be someone who gets a majority of the vote in the Republican Party. It's going to be a polarity of the vote. So you only need to get more than everyone else, not the majority of the base. So it's going to be interesting how they come together going into any sort of general election. Now, in that governor's race, it would be a rematch between Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams, predicated on Stacey Abrams running, of course, which I think all of us anticipate she will. But there's another new fly in the ointment going on, because Vernon Jones, the former Democratic state representative from Georgia who ran for U.S. Senate as a Democrat, his main claim to fame before switching parties and becoming a Trumper was that in 2008, when he was running for Senate, he famously photoshopped himself into a flyer with Barack Obama to pretend that Barack Obama had endorsed him, and got busted for it. And So Vernon, if you're in Georgia, he's been a political entity for decades. He's run for sheriff, he's run for Congress, he's run for Senate, he's run for city council. If there's a political seat in the state, he has run for it. And so the new grift he has gotten is now he is running for governor as a Republican against Brian Kemp, which sounds insane for someone to be lifelong Democrat to suddenly switch over, become a MAGA, then run against an incumbent Republican governor. But at that same Georgia GOP convention, Brian Kemp got about 30% of the vote. Vernon Jones got about 21% of the vote. And if you look at the speeches, if you look at the crowds they drew at the convention, Vernon Jones has the enthusiasm behind him. His social media presence is massive, and because he's on television, he's in that Fox News, Newsmax sphere of influence. He has humongous name recognition. Also, interesting thing, Vernon Jones, his campaign manager is one of my mentees, C.J. Pearson, who's 18 years old and a student at the University of Alabama. And so when Vernon was switching parties, the only person in the Republican Party that would deal with him was CJ, who was doing all this from high school. And Vernon Jones had a pretty good chance of running a competitive race for the Republican nomination for governor here in Georgia, which tells you just how far that schism in the party has gone, where someone can just simply have Trump support, and that puts you into the running to be the Republican nominee for governor. So it's going to be interesting nationwide seeing how many traditional Republicans are able to win and how many lose primaries to MAGA candidates, and if those MAGA candidates have any legs in the general elections.
But haven't the establishment Republicans really have been pushed to the side, at least in this particular moment? I mean, President Trump, I keep reminding people he got 10 million more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016. He is a force, Robert. I mean, he just is. And Herschel Walker was a Republican before President Trump. Even George P. Bush, George Prescott Bush, who is Jeb Bush's son, has aligned himself with Donald Trump. And I think, because they're different pieces, he's like a Rorschach test. Different people get different things from him, right? Help me with that. Because I'm also watching the Republicans groom a new generation of black people they are flush with money. They get a lot of support from the party. I'm not saying I agree with it because I don't agree with their positions, but I see them grooming. I see them doing something that I'm not saying the Democrats do. Oh, am I wrong?
Absolutely. What Republicans have realized is they realized this shortly after the McCain nomination, which is the traditional Republican tactic of making the next oldest white guy in the room the nominee and the leader of the party. Just didn't work anymore. It was Bob Dole's party. It was George W. Bush's party. Then it was John McCain's party, and simply put, they start dying out. So they had to make this Faustian bargain with the Tea Party. They brought in people like Sarah Palin to kind of start exciting people. So then by 2012, you have the Tea Party in full swing, and Republicans thought, okay, we can use these people for some energy. You can use them to help us get a majority. Then by 2014, you start seeing them getting into leadership. You start seeing the Ted Cruzes show up in the Senate. You start seeing the Rand Paul type people show up. And so Republicans still thought, okay, they're really helping out. They're going to be great. And 2016, Trump takes it and he flips over the apple cart. And now that is the party. That is the standard bearer. In 2020, Republicans didn't have a campaign platform. They literally, at the convention, decided simply not have a campaign platform. And they have stuck to that. Nobody knows what the hell the Republican plan on education reform is. Nobody knows what the Republican plan to do on health care and bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. They don't run on a platform anymore. They run on just a culture war. Every time, you're in the cable news sphere also, every time you're on conservative television, the only thing they want to talk about is, are they going to teach critical race theory to my children? Are trans athletes going to be running track against our little girls? Are they teaching woke? Are these corporations teaching woke anti-whiteness? That is what they care about. That they've understood that nobody is voting on campaign finance reform anymore. That doesn't fill stadium. That doesn't fill arenas. That doesn't get people interested in the party and grow the base. What does, however, is playing on white fear, white insecurity, economic anxiety, homophobia, xenophobia, sexism, misogyny. Those are racism. Those are the things that puts butts in the seats and gets donations into the coffers. So it's gotten to the point now that if you are someone like a Mitt Romney, who's the Republican nominee, the next oldest, richest white guy in the room, now you're a pariah. You're an outcast in the party. Liz Cheney, who comes from a Republican political royalty, being censured. Someone like a Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State state of Georgia, a traditional Southern Georgia conservative Republican. Now he's an outcast. He was censured by the state party. So what MAGA has decided is that they no longer. It was one thing to be in a power sharing agreement where they would try to work the agenda through. Now they've decided it's going to be MAGA or bust. So many traditional Republicans, people like Senator Burr in North Carolina, Toomey in Pennsylvania, have simply decided not to run for re-election because they understand they can't win a Republican Party given the current climate, because the level of crazy you have to be at in order to motivate that base, it's a place that they're not willing to go. They'd rather simply not be in office. But what we do not know is the legs that movement has, because very few politicians have been able to replicate the Trump model. DeSantis in Florida has been able to replicate the Trump model, but very few people have been able to take that and go forward with it. Even Brian Kemp, who famously had the campaign ad where he pointed a shotgun at a high school student to show how Second Amendment he was, to scare him away from his daughter, that whole thing. Then he had another one where he had a deportation truck that he said he was going to take illegals down to the border. Well, someone pointed out that Georgia is not border Mexico, so was he taking them to Florida or Alabama or South Carolina? But you don't need to get into all those details. Even Brian Kemp isn't MAGA enough for their MAGA crowd. Ducey in Arizona is not MAGA enough for the MAGA crowd. So we're losing the concept and idea of bipartisanship. We're losing the concept of centrist. There's no such thing really as a centrist in American politics anymore, because we are so polarized at this point that if you're not in 100% unanimity with either side of the aisle, this is also a problem on the Democratic side. If you're not 100% lockstep with the agenda, they're ready to throw you out and treat you worse than the other side is. So no one runs on how they're going to compromise, how they're going to get something done. Republicans run on owning the libs and pushing forward an agenda of America first. And then if you ask them what that means, they say America first, and they start yelling at you. And then Democrats often has gotten to the point where where people who, even if you do have some conservative leanings, but you majority of the time vote for Democrats, now you're a pariah within the party because you need to be in 100% lockstep with the agenda on the outside margins of the party, which makes it difficult to come to a consensus and create a governing majority. As you said, we're already into the 2022 election cycle. Nobody has released their army, so to say, from the 2020 election. Nobody has put down the weapons and decided to spend a period of time governing. You have to go directly from election to fundraising to election, and that never-ending cycle leaves no room for governance.
You know what? Attorney Aaron Connolly, co-founder of Covenant Strategies, you are working on campaigns all over the country. Is it fair to say that we're in the 2022 cycle? And if so, what are we looking at? If not, why aren't we there?
We are there, absolutely. As you know, in many ways that starts before the previous cycle ends from a strategy side. And what now we're seeing is folks coming out and either saying that they are going to run for re-election or they're going to take on a new role, as Representative Val Demings is looking at in Florida. We are in the election cycle, and I believe we'll all start getting more of those fun fundraising calls soon. But the thing that I'm hearing more from everyone, whether it's within the political circles or outside of it, is exactly what your show is talking about here, is this polarization, right? That folks are a little bit nervous to speak up even on the progressive side. So I think it will be interesting to take a look at what the media chooses to focus on. And your show, I think, always covers a huge issues that folks don't necessarily hear always on when they turn on MSNBC. You dig into things, Santita, and I always appreciate that. But I think that's the crucial element, right? So we look at the digital space and the influence that Facebook has and how that's been regulated, and how that will change for elections moving forward. That's something that I'm interested in watching, and what people are actually able to see on their feeds and digest, as we know that digital space, Facebook and others, are a huge source of news for folks, right? So I think that's where the battle is going to start. I'm hoping that the good guys have already started their build up there. And
But to that point, because a lot of people are looking at the algorithms on Facebook, the algorithms in social media that are squeezing out messages. I mean, later on in the show, the last segment, we'll be talking about hunger in America and how that's reflective of where we really are in this economic recovery. We're not hearing the issues, and we're not even hearing about these big races. These big races. I mean, and that's happening, Aaron, as we are watching voting suppression it's being deeply encoded now. I mean, people are going to have less of an opportunity to get registered to vote. They're going to be purged from the rolls, and they're not going to be able. They're not going to have the time to vote. I mean, how do we plow through this?
Well, and we see it happening already, and the issue with elections and our integrity there is troubling, to say the least. We, in Arizona, a place where I worked for many years, had something called the permanent early voter list. You may hear about it on the news related to the audit. It's basically voting by mail, and it has the word permanent in it. They just repealed that provision. So folks that were on the permanent early voter list will now be purged, right? That hurts in a battleground state like Arizona, where we saw it turn blue last time. So we have a lot of work to do. Also, some of these tools that progressives have had in their toolbox with regards to digital advertising and media in that way is probably going to be limited in some way that's a little bit unpredictable. So we're going to see campaigns doing everything they can to not only get press, but use the systems that support them that are already built. So the good news is for progressives is a lot was done from an infrastructure perspective to support that in the last cycle, where we did not see, for example, in the previous general election, where everybody kind of gets their stuff together, if you will. Not every campaign is a competitive campaign, so some of those structures need to be updated as a whole apparatus, and I believe that has taken place. However, there's still a lot of work to do, and we have to within individual campaigns and movements that are supporting them, whether that's larger organizations that are registering voters, et cetera, we have to make sure, as we saw the successful races like the Georgia runoff, et cetera, where those coalitions are talking to each other, right? Yes. We have to start registering voters now to make sure that we have those educated voters when we ask them to jump through hoops in places like Georgia and Arizona now. It's not going to be as easy. They're making it more and more difficult. And as we see the gridlock at the national level, it doesn't seem that we're going to get any protections there, unfortunately. So it's going to take more work, more people at the doors, more folks reminding people that they have to either sign up for a mail-in ballot again, or depending on their state, obviously, I do not want to give any advice. They're very different laws now as we see these suppression rules hit. But campaigns are going to have to be smarter, more nimble, manage their data better, manage their money in a way that leaves room for flexibility, and really, really focus on that grassroots level connection to voters, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody on the call knows that works. We're going to have to double down on that effort, and I think people are still a little nervous given the pandemic conditions. So I hope that deep organizing starts now and not just the fundraising.
I mean, yesterday, Gail from Milwaukee. Gail, what's on your mind? You got some thoughts about 22 and 24.
Well, I guess three main things. One thing you mentioned that we've got to, how do we approach this? There's three things that they need to do and study. The Republicans, especially with Donald Trump, what they do is reverse. They will take what they're doing and project that onto the Democrats. You got to be ready for that. And another thing that they also do is they come in right away and tell Democrats, especially the young Democrats, not the Republicans will tell the Democrats, what have the Democrats done for you lately? No party is perfect. However, we all need to remember, not just black people, but poor white people, the few things that we have gotten, the little progress that we have made that they're trying to take, we got that through the Democratic Party. And I don't think Democrats fight hard enough for that. They get bullied and they get afraid of Republicans saying the Democrats haven't done anything to you. We need to remind people constantly because Democrats are fighting right now.
But Miss
for
Gail,
the things that we've gotten so far.
I would tweak that message because I hear you. But I would tell people that the Democratic Party's been more amenable to your demands because the Democrats haven't given us anything. We had to fight the Democrats to make the progress.
Well, I don't mean given, but they have been on the forefront to take it to the people like it is.
But what I'm saying is, actually, we've been on the forefront, and we've been able to use the Democratic Party to make that happen.
Well, a lot of people, what I'm saying is and you're right, a lot of people, but you got to remember, a lot of Democrats, black people are Democrats.
No, we are now. I'm saying we are now.
No,
and I'm just
historically.
No, we were Republicans.
All I'm saying is, well, yes, they were at first, and then you went into the Dixiecrat thing and that whole revolution thing that came apart, with after that. I get all of that.
Yeah.
But right now, my point is, and maybe you said it better, I'm a little nervous.
No, don't be nervous.
But you can't let people, thank you so much. You can't let them run that game like Democrats have done nothing for you, like Trump said, why don't you try us? That's the devil's game. That's like saying, well, you tried being good, so why not be bad for a little while? I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that's part of it. The other thing is,
I don't want you, but you got a minute because I don't want you to be nervous. Just
okay.
You got the minute.
Okay, I'll hurry up with the other thing. The last thing is to remind Democrats when they run up against black or white Republicans, ask them what the young people, what are they going to do for you? What have they shown you they've done with regard to your education, housing, jobs, and everything like that, and run some of their old tapes when they voted down these things that people needed. We've got to remind them of what they did in the recent past, in the past, and don't let them run the reverse game. I don't care if a Republican is black or white. And thank you so much for your kindness.
Stay right, no, Miss. I want you to stay right here because we talk a little bit right after we get off the air. Okay, just stay here. You're gonna stay with me for a minute, Miss Gail.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Stay right here. I'm glad that you're listening to us out there in Milwaukee. See, it wasn't that hard now, was it? No.
No,
people, you're a person with opinions.
I know,
That's
but
what
it's
the
such.
For.
You all are doing such a good job, and this is very serious. I don't think most people realize how serious it is.
30.
Most people don't realize Hitler could happen again.
Well, you know what? And the thing is, let me tell you something. And the Democratic Party and the Republican Party won't save you from them and from those forces.
Exactly.
We do that all the time. When my father ran for president, he had to run against the Democratic
15.
Party, unfortunately. Now,
exactly.
I remember that.
And I know
that. When my brother ran for Congress, he had to run against the mainstream party. And all I'm saying is nobody's going to save you for you but you. So now the Democrats are your horse right now. Use them and make them run.
Well, that's what
I'm with you. Stay right here. We're going to talk during the break. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. What's going on with Kamala Harris? Is she been set up to fail? We'll talk about it, everybody. Back in just a minute. Oh, Miss Gail, all I'm saying is, we're the ones who save us. Nobody, I mean, that's why we have to kick the Democrats because I don't think they are bullied as much as they are corporatist.
Okay, I get that, but my point is this. I'm 67 years old.
Yes.
I in Milwaukee with Father Grappi. I was on picket lines. I'm black, and I was a Democrat. And my point is exactly how I said it. I can't come out and say, they already know I'm black when I get out there. The party that, like you said, that I'm running on, the ticket is Democrat. I have to be realistic and what code I have to put, what ticket I have to pay to get in there. My basic point is this time around, black people, because you're right about one thing, and that's really where I really wanted to call. I listen every morning. We cannot let them use reverse psychology because Trump is very good at that. The evil that he does, he reverses it. And then you get a lot of black Republicans that'll come in and they'll tell you, why are you voting Democrat? Well, the bottom line is this. I can literally add up and you can see what Republicans there have and have not done. And this recent go round, they're really going to be using that. That's why they're going out for the Herschel Walkers and people like that. Because they're getting ready to run that game.
But what I'm telling you, Ms. Gale, is that they have been looking for, they have been grooming young black political talent for decades. That is my point.
I get that.
No. I'm just saying, no.
I get that.
And let me tell you, Democrats do that too. They just don't do it with young black progressives, and they don't do it with white progressives, and they don't do it with Hispanic progressives and Asian progressives. And that's the energy of the party, and that's why they do. That's why they lost everything down ballot. The only thing we won.
Okay,
in
but
2020
but
was
my
the
point,
presidency.
right?
Let me let my panel in so they can talk with you. We're going to bring on one other person. I want them to talk with you while we have this little space before we get back on the air. Robert, Aaron, you want to say something? Robert, and then you, Aaron.
Well, I would just say that. I would just say to that point that often the problem that we run into is that Republicans do the great above the table game. They do the all the hermeneutics to make it look like they're doing something. But if you notice, the black Republicans they do allow to run aren't are only the ones who basically come out and give them cover for racism.
We have Attorney Fancher.
There and say white people aren't racist. You'll be the Republican nominee for something. They'll give you a TV show. They'll give you a radio show. They'll make you a congressperson.
I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it.
We know that you're aware, but we're having a conversation, Ms. Gale. That's all.
No, I agree. That's why I was so glad when the gentleman said that. And what I really like about what's going on today is when you're back here in the cities and all these places listening like this and you're watching television, you just want to jump to the screen because what I like about today is strategy. And that race is going on right now. It's been going on since even before the last one quit. That's why they're rerunning all of those races in Arizona. I mean, doing all those recounts and everything. And just like McConnell is telling people, well, we didn't vote for the looking into what happened with January 6th because we don't want to talk about it. They are telling people that some people buy that. They're constantly working on it. They're running on that right now, which you already know that. But what really bothers me when it comes to minorities, especially, is that they do a reverse game and tell you Democrats have done nothing for you. That really scares me. I'm not saying Democrats are saints, and they're not. They run all kind of games. However, if I got to choose between the two to help me get to where I've got to go, that's where I'm going to go until you show me something different. And don't just say, we want your vote. Notice they always say we want your vote. They, like you were talking about before, there's no policy there to back that.
And all I'm
There's
saying
nothing
is
there.
Democrats are going to have to do that too. Democrats are going to have to be even better at promoting. See, one of the problems you have internally with the Democratic Party is that they do not promote black people the way that they should. They don't. And they absolutely, the people who help them the most, they push back against because they have become a corporate-driven party. They, too, run against their base. And all I'm simply saying to you is, Ms. Gale, is this. They're going to have to do a better job because they cannot leave those gaps that enable these young black folks who have voted for President Obama, who have been Democrats. They leave a gap that makes these people, that infuriates them, and then they leave the party. There's something that I'm simply
okay,
saying.
Well, where is that gap then? Now that's a good point that I've heard that, but where is that gap?
Let me tell you,
and the point is this.
What I'm saying is when you get to Washington and when you see who's promoted and who's not promoted, when you get on the ground and you see who is pushed to run for office and who's not pushed to run for office, or who's pushed out of office, or who's pushed away from running
and
for office.
And whose responsibility is that to change that? That's all.
I'm saying what we're going to have to do.
That's at the grassroots level.
No, I'm saying we have to push the DNC to be more inclusive of the rest of us.
Definitely. And at that bench building level, Santita, this is Aaron, we need to start having these conversations when folks are coming out of university, when they're showing an interest in government, when they're volunteering at these campaigns. and
1 minute.
the elders in the room, in
Hold
the
on 1
political
second.
world,
Do we have
need
Attorney Fancher?
Yes, you do.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes,
Just
good
send me a
morning.
text and let me know that. Okay. But Miss Gail, I got 30 seconds. I've got to give it to her, and I just want you to continue to listen. I thank you. I'm so honored that you listened to us. Very quickly, Aaron, you got 15 seconds.
I was just saying, let's empower those young people that we see that have this talent, that have the passion, the
30.
drive to make a difference in public service, and let's do better to empower them, whether that's through our support systems in the community, at church, suggesting that they should do it can go a long way. But within the political systems, we have to do a better job of looking for those folks, empowering them, and making sure that they do come
because
from
the young people are turning from both parties anyway. Like they're turning away from church. They're not necessarily turning away from God,
right.
but they're turning away from institutions, and we need to watch that because you can't come to them with the 20th century argument. It's not going to work. Stay right there, everybody.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Boy, we're having quite the conversation. Miss Gail has called in from Milwaukee. I love you, Miss Gail. Thank you for listening to us every day, and get all your friends in Milwaukee to continue to listen to the Santita Jackson Show. And I want you to continue to call in. You were great. And I'm glad we were able to engage. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And we've got our Facebook family over here. It's a global family. I saw you, Vanderlei. I see you, Linear Bob, looking at the lunar eclipse out in San Jose. And oh my goodness, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, and Zenobia, and Jewel, and Linda, and Mark, and Lorraine, and Deborah, and Barbara from Oak Park, and Big Bree, and all of you. Daryl, sending you much love. Everybody, D-Ray, Michael Ann. Hey, girl, my sister from the left coast. She's like one of my first morning stars. Helped to name the group, by the way. And what is it, Carib Queen? Oh, I love you all. Eric Burrows, Charles, thank you, even though you think I'm a conspiracist, whatever that means. You know, that is invented by the CIA intelligence community. I'm mindful of that. Anyway, we're going to be talking about election 2020. 2020 and 2022 and 2024. We are in the midst of election 2022. The primaries for election 2022 are about a year away. You need to be getting registered to vote. As they are shutting the doors on your opportunity to vote, who's organizing? Well, you need to organize block by block. Don't wait for a party to do that for you. You do it. You make sure you're registered to vote, and you continue to check the rolls to make sure you have not been purged. Going to be talking about that, and we're going to talk about Kamala Harris. There was a CNN report that said that the White House was perplexed by her performance. Some people even said that she didn't give a strong performance on immigration while she was in Guatemala and Mexico. Some have said that she was set up to fail. We got to talk about all of that because all of that is part of the 2022 cycle in 2024. She's taken heat from the left, from progressives who said you shouldn't tell people to stay away. The people on the right are saying, yeah, you were right, but you didn't go far enough. Wow. Immigration, almost one of those third rail topics in American politics. So we're going to talk about that. And at the bottom of the hour, economic recovery. Who's really recovering? Are we recovering? Are you recovering? The food banks say no. So what's the deal? Dr. Maxwell will bring that to us. But we've got this magnificent panel talking with us about election 2022. Let's get right to some headlines so we can get back into that conversation. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 77 degrees, although it was said to be traveling north of that today. Partly cloudy. It's a little muggy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 98 degrees will be your high. There's an excessive heat warning. Please check on your loved ones. Check on your neighbors. Call people. Even if you don't know a neighbor, knock on a door. Find out, make sure that they have water. A lot of people don't have running water in their homes. A lot of people are in the heat. If you can spare a fan, do that. Some people don't have electricity. let's just look out for each other today. This is going to be a tough day for our brothers and sisters in Minneapolis, St. Paul. The Dow closed down 152 points. The NASDAQ closed down 13 points. The S&P 500 closed down 7 points. The Twins, well, they fell to the Yankees. The Yankees 9, the Twins 6. Maybe they'll redeem themselves tonight when they play. And then the Cubs were triumphant over the Padres, 3-1. They have a day off today. The Blue Jays, well, they were triumphant over the Sox, 6-2. Maybe they'll make it up tonight, everybody. Oh, the NBA playoffs. Are you watching, everybody? The Suns 123, the Nuggets 98. The Bucks will be playing the Nets today or tonight, and the Clippers will be playing the Jazz. All right, everybody. You know President Biden is overseas. He meets today with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson as part of his first foreign trip since taking office. So two are expected to talk about lifting travel restrictions between the U.S. and UK put in place because of COVID-19. They're also expected to agree on a new Atlantic Charter that was put in place by FDR and Winston Churchill during the Second World War. The big priority for America right now, for our officials, is getting people vaccinated at home and abroad. Now the United States will be participating at a bigger level in the COVAX program from the United Nations. They have agreed, our government, you have agreed to donate 500 million doses, 500 million doses of Pfizer vaccines worldwide, everybody. Even though our rate is slowing, we're seeing a lot of pain all over the world, and we're so glad that is happening. After years of stops and starts, the Keystone Pipeline is officially dead, everybody. The developer announced it is pulling the plug on the controversial project after the Biden administration revoked its permit in January. And guess what? China is returning to its strict COVID restrictions as they are fighting a new outbreak. And Oxford University, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, located in England and Oxford, England. They call it Oxbridge, Cambridge and Oxford. Cambridge University, and of course Oxford University. Well, guess what? They're comprised of a lot of different colleges, and one of their most prestigious colleges within the university has voted to remove a photo of Queen Elizabeth, the reigning monarch, from their common room. This is big, everybody, citing Britain's colonial history, that a move that has touched off quite the controversy on that campus. We'll be talking more about that as we go forward. Everybody, let's talk about Kamala Harris. She, of course, has made history, and we've been so proud of her, as she has become the first African American, first Asian American woman. Of course, she is Indian, East Indian, and she is also Black. Her father was Jamaican, is Jamaican. She has made history. And so we're proud of that. But now, you get on the stage, you got to perform. And so the White House is perplexed by her performance in south of the border. They're saying, well, we expected her to really just do this a little bit better, but was she set up to fail? Those are some of the headlines everywhere. That when she was given immigration, that's one of the third rails of American political life. It's like no president's been able to get their arms around that. And the president gave it to her. And then her team pushed back on it. They were like, we're going to deal with some of the systematic problems because this is real big. Well, Lester Holt pushed up on her in an interview, of course, Chicago's Lester Holt, who's now the big guy at NBC. So proud of him as he anchors. And he said, you haven't been to the border. She said, well, I haven't been to Europe either. So what? So what do you say about all of that, everybody? Has she been set up to fail? Did she fail? Is it too early to say? We've got attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, joining. Attorney Robert Patillo, host of his own radio show on WAOK every Sunday, everybody, from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, our own legal eagle, brilliant political organizer and strategist from Covenant Strategies, attorney Aaron Connolly. Let me start with you, Mark Fancher, since you're just joining us. What did you make of Vice President Harris's? What did you make of her week, this first foray onto the big global stage?
Well, I think her experience can be instructive, particularly for people of color who choose to enter into service in these political and economic institutions which have been established by powerful white people historically. I guess if you're going to walk into a snake pit, you better know that that's what you're walking into, and you better go in prepared to deal with the vipers. And I think that people who enter into political service are faced with a choice. They can either go into it with the idea that they are going to essentially emulate the people who have been in those positions in the past, and those have typically been, powerful white men, and they're going to do the same things that they do in the same way that they do it, essentially by, aping the arrogant, aggressive kind of approach that they've always taken, or they're going to take a different approach. And they're going to go in and they're going to attempt as best they can to be transformative figures, that they're going to come in with a different perspective, a different vision, and they're going to do things in a different way. I think that Kamala Harris chose the first choice. What she did and what she said would not have raised an eyebrow if it had been done by Donald Rumsfeld or somebody like that. For a Donald Rumsfeld or another established white, aggressive military hawk, isolationist kind of a person to wag their finger at the brown people below the border and to scold them and to put on a tough kind of a front and to say, we're going to deal with you, nobody would have thought twice about it. In fact, most people probably would have celebrated it and said that that's the way that, U.S. foreign policy should be conducted. We don't tolerate anything that is contrary to our interests. But when people of color, do that, it's almost like putting on a coat that doesn't fit very well. Although I think that they do it as well as anybody might expect, I don't think that it really looked good on Condoleezza Rice. I don't think it looked good on Susan Rice. Doing that kind of thing, even though they are ideologically there, even though politically they're there, it just doesn't look good because it wasn't designed for people of color. And I think that people of color are expected to enter into those situations and to be transformative, to bring something different to the table. I think one of the best examples is your dad. I mean, when Reverend Jackson chose to enter the presidential campaign, the presidential race back in 1984, he could have just gone in and said all kinds of things that would make, rich white people feel good. He could have just, bowed his head and, shuffled and said all kinds of things that would make the general white population feel comfortable with him and all of that kind of thing. But he went in with a straight back. He went in with a vision that was grounded in morality and ethics. He went in with a vision for building an inclusive America that embraced brotherhood and looking out for everybody. And when he went south of the border and visited countries in Central America and elsewhere, he went not scolding them, not looking down on them, but saying that I see you as me. We are the same. We are brothers and sisters. And if I'm president, then we're going to have a different kind of a relationship with you. And, I was in 1984, I was about 25 years old, and I went on a solidarity tour of Nicaragua, during that time. And, everywhere I went, everybody was praising Jesse Jackson. His picture was everywhere. Everybody, said that, this is the man, this is the guy. And they could not believe that there was any possibility that the U.S. voters would in any way reject him because they saw him as a heroic figure. That's the transformative kind of a thing that I think is consistent with who people of color are meant to be. That's what God wanted us to be. I mean, he didn't place us here, I think. He didn't put us in these situations to simply continue to do the things that evil forces in the world have done historically. We've got to be better than that. And to the extent that she's catching heat or she's having trouble, it's because she's playing a role that really was not designed for her.
So, what say you, Aaron?
Well, I think for a woman and a woman of color in a position of power, there is always going to be that extra level of scrutiny and criticism, as we've discussed many times in your show throughout the previous election cycle. Immigration is the third rail, right? And we see that it's nuanced, that it's a difficult conversation for folks. But I was disappointed at the tone and delivery of her remarks in Guatemala specifically. But at the same time, a soundbite isn't the whole picture. And we need to walk back and understand that they're outside of these press appearances and public appearances, that the vice president is doing real geopolitical negotiations behind the scenes with these governments that are in crisis in some cases, in transition in many cases, and that she's also addressing their press as well, right? So we have to look at the whole picture, I think. I don't believe she has completely failed. I'm disappointed to see that there wasn't more nuance to her remarks to Lester Holt. I think that was a missed opportunity there. As someone who spent a lot of time in Arizona and spent a lot of time at the border, just from an optics perspective, we know that those on the right side, the Republican side, I should say, make a display of going to the border, right? They're not really addressing anything, but the photo op is there. So I think that was a bit of a miscalculation to say no, but I will see the structural integrity of the border, meet with law enforcement there, just to have a personal perspective. I think to take that talking point away would be my goal as a communications professional. So I hope that they review this trip and see the places for improvement. But that being said, she would not be receiving these headlines if it was Mike Pence, for example, if it was another man in power, and it wouldn't feel so. I've heard from some people, and we saw comments from AOC this week, right, that the comments on immigration were tone deaf. It lacked the knowledge and awareness that people do come to this border seeking asylum in crisis, right? And that is a legal option that's available to folks. And the United States still does need to hold that as a legal option for people that are fearing for their life, that are fleeing persecution. And that is a legal remedy at the border. And that's something that should not be discounted, right? And these are real families. And my concern is that we're not
corporations created. The United Fruit Company.
Exactly. Yes.
This is what, our own greed has, these people, she did say, I know you all want to stay home, but there was no context to her remarks.
Right. Or awareness, right?
Well, I don't know about the awareness because, she's India, Jamaica, she's got, and she.
Right. No. But we didn't feel that.
Yeah.
We didn't hear that she comes from it, right? That's troubling.
Yeah.
To not have that acknowledgement, and disappointing for folks. I'm a product of immigrants. Most of my friends are products of immigrants, whether that's, many of them are the first generation Americans in their family. Some of their parents did come over the border, right? Legally and illegally, as we hear it. But many of them were fleeing that. So we need to hear that there is a sense from the progressive side that these are families. These people deserve health care. These are people that have entered the United States with outside the bounds of legalities, right? Without the normal process, are still being denied health insurance, right? They're producing in our economy and still not given the same COVID relief that many of our other citizens have received, right? So there has to be some balance and acknowledgement of that, I believe, because especially the Democratic Party and progressive movement in those border states too understand that this is such a big and nuanced issue, right? That people are dying on the border because they don't have enough water, and law enforcement goes to destroy the water cans left so they survive, right? There's so many levels to this big issue. I think there was just a general sense of disconnection that was disappointing.
Sure. Robert Patillo, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting to me because one of the easy parts about being a Republican is certitude. You don't have to be nuanced in your discussion. You can simply say, we hate illegal immigrants. We don't want you here. MAGA 2024, and be done. You don't have to, kind of thread this fine needle on making sure you don't make any diplomatic faux pas. We've been trying to work on this immigration issue for 40 years since Reagan did amnesty in 1986. Every single president has promised a solution to the immigration issue, and there's been recalcitrance on every side. On the one hand, you have corporations who donate to Republicans, but also need those H-1B visa workers, and also they need illegal labor that they do not have to pay minimum wage to in order to force them into slave labor type conditions. And that's what keeps our supply chain going in this country. So those people aren't really in favor of giving giving folks legal status because they'll hurt their bottom line. On the other hand, you have the hardcore, hardline white nationalists who believe in the David Duke replacement theory, and they feel that that America is going to become a black and brown nation by 2024, and that you need to build walls to keep them from coming in and overrunning us, even though our population is declining. White birth rates are at an all-time low since the 1930s, and in order for us to keep the arteries of the country running, we're going to need younger blood coming in, and that's going to come through immigration. Otherwise, we face the risk of a grain population like Japan is going through. Concomitants with that, you have the people who are first generation, second generation, the children of immigrants such as myself, who understand that the legal immigration process is impossible to navigate. You have to have tens of thousands of dollars. You have to live a perfect life for decades. You have to attend classes, work, everything along the lines, just for the chance to come to America legally, and that there's no help in sight for how to fix that. And then also you have the humanitarian crisis, which is going on longitude or latitudinally. You can go across the globe and see where climate change is forcing people to migrate northward. You can look at Africa, you can look at Southeast Asia, you can look at Central America and Mexico, and see people are being forced to migrate northward because climate change is destroying crops, it's causing droughts, it's causing rivers to overflow. In addition to that, you have the residue of a century of U.S. foreign policy in Central America, where we're supposed to be the hegemonic power, propping up drug republics, propping up corporations and banana republics across the area, kidnapping political leadership, sponsoring political coups that has caused the political chaos in those regions, which leads to people having to leave their homes and walk 1,000 miles across the desert, hopefully for the chance of picking avocados instead of living the tropical paradise they are from. And then you have the U.S. war on drugs, which is financing the narco-terrorism down there, which is making many of these areas unsafe. And so you send Kamala Harris down there with nothing to announce nothing, and then you hope that she can make magic out of this, and then we're amazed when things don't turn out great. So we gave her an impossible task. She tried to thread the needle. She missed. Hopefully we can get better policy going forward.
Amen to that. And I tell you what, if you stick with your historical mission, you won't miss. Because it's a global stage out here. Remember, 95% of the world lives beyond America's borders.
10.
There's a narrative out here, everybody. Think about that. Think about it. Stay right here.
5.
On the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to be talking about how we're really doing. We're going to continue this conversation, too. Back in just a minute. Santita Jackson Show. I have to tell you all, Aaron, I know that as a woman and as a black woman, she has, because it's the blackness that's the issue. You can be Asian, you can be all these things, but it's when you're black that you got the problem. That's the spot that just can't be removed. And I got that. But, Mark, you do make a point. I had someone on my old radio show, more than 10 years ago. My first radio show, and I will always be grateful to WVON for giving me that chance. Thank you, Melody Span Cooper, and especially Elroy Smith, who pushed me onto the radio. He was the top urban programmer at the time. You remember Mark? Mark, are you still there? And
I'm still here. Yeah.
you remember when the hostages were taken in 1979 in Iran? My
Hmm.
my mother and the Women's Auxiliary Group of Operation Push were in Lebanon meeting with Yasser Arafat about the Palestinians because my parents really were the ones who put the Palestinians on the map here, and we took the hits for it. I took the hit in my Harvard interview. We took all kinds of hits, but it was the right thing to do. Pulling for Israeli security and Palestinian justice, but we had a no talk policy with the Palestinians at that time. So talking about them got you into trouble, cultural trouble, political trouble, all of that. So when they were taken into captivity, Yasser Arafat was speaking with the Ayatollah, and because of the respect they had for Reverend and his work, and my mother and her work, because she met Yasser Arafat first, she'd been going over there for a couple of years by that time, about a year and a half for that time. They were going to release all of the hostages to her and her group. They said, if you go to Tehran, we'll give the hostages, all of them to you. But President Carter stood in between that. He was calling my father like every hour on the hour because this was also Thanksgiving. So we were never apart for the holidays. And he's telling my father how dangerous this is. You got to get your wife out of there. My father's like freaking out. He'll walk into fire, but don't you do it. Okay. And
Hmm.
so the compromise, if you remember, you don't you might it was not publicly known as a compromise, but the compromise was that they were going to release who? The women and the black people. And the Ayatollah's justification was because of the oppression that you have had to endure. I acknowledge that. I see you, and I'm gonna let you go. That was a compromise. Okay.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
20 plus years later, after and personally, I like Colin Powell. He's a great guy, great wife, great family, all of that. Condoleezza Rice, boom, boom, boom. After they were in office, I had someone on my show who said, and I heard it. When you go overseas, that ended. They began to see black people as
Hmm.
imperialists also. And we
Yeah.
have to be mindful of that. And I'm so grateful that history will reflect that my father ran in the King tradition.
Yep.
So
1 minute.
you didn't get the
Yeah. It,
presidency.
it hurt. It hurt my heart when that happened globally. It
Oh,
just really did.
it's
And
heartbreaking.
I think we kind of got it back with Katrina when the world was reminded
Yeah.
that on the ground, on the mass level, we were still oppressed. But it took that, I think, before the world began to sort of see us in a true light again.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's been awful. And I,
30.
I know she can't feel great because see, she's not a true immigrant. We're all over here on a colonial project. Black and brown people are, and Indian people. We're not here. We didn't come here escaping anything. We were brought here. So she's on a different she's from a different historical lineage.
10.
And you have to acknowledge that. Max Wolf, are you there, Dr. Wolf?
5.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Always bringing him into the middle of craziness. But you all stay here because I want you all to hear this.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Just let me thank you all. My WCPT family, the largest progressive talk radio station in the nation, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, my global family over here on Facebook, my family over on YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you for opening your heart and your mind to this show and to everybody who's on it. Just, I thank God for you. We helped to get each other through the pandemic, and I can't thank you enough for all of your love. And even when we disagree, you've been so wonderful, and I thank you for that. And these people, as I've most of the many of the guests I've had have been friends of mine, and we have these conversations all the time. And so I thank you, Erin Connolly, attorney Erin Connolly. Really, her biggest job is being the mother of John, who's the most precious baby in the world. Let me just say that. And then Robert Patillo, who's a wonderful husband and father of little pups. And of course, brilliant man of God and husband and father. We've got attorney Mark Fancher. And then, someone who's just really become part of my heart, Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. And one of the things that I've always found most intriguing about him, as I have with all of you, is his heart, is his really using all of his brilliance and his learnedness to try and make the world right. And so that's what we've been talking about with Kamala Harris and with the election 2022 and 2024. It's about getting things right, everybody. And the pandemic, in many respects, has been used, to me, it's been a fig leaf for the ills that have been not percolating under the surface that we've been living with day after day after day. People have been struggling economically. Our health has not been what it should be. The education system has not been what it ought to be. All of that. And so now when we're looking at this economic recovery that the mainstream media is touting, there's a disconnect because widespread hunger is persistent. And if you go to the soup kitchens, if you go to the food pantries, you see it. You see it in New York City. You see it in rural America. You see it all over the United States. So, and that's something that that Dr. Wolf has wanted to talk about today, and I want to thank you for that. Welcome back to the show. This is your segment. Of course, he's here every Thursday at 7:30 Central Standard Time. Dr. Wolf, how are you?
Pleasure to be here, and good morning, all.
Dr. Wolf, I mean, what are the numbers telling us? Because we're hearing about this economic recovery, and yet soup kitchens are full, food pantries are emptied. They say we don't have enough food to meet the demand. What's going on?
Yeah, so look, I think there has been some recovery, especially off the sort of lowest points of 2020 and early 2021, and that is great news. So certainly not trying to deny that for a lot of reasons, at least hopefully for a long time, but certainly for the moment, things do seem and feel a bit better for millions of folks, and that's a big deal. That being said, as the economy tends to be producing a larger and larger underclass that's either uncounted or undercounted, the official statistics, they sort of don't acknowledge the unofficial reality that is the reality in millions and millions of households. And one of the places we see that are in these hunger numbers. So we know last year was an unfortunate year in terms of a recent record-breaking kind of surge in emergency food need. And so we know that just officially, the ones we count, not the neighbor who helps or the relative who helps or the people who help outside the official system, but 6 billion meals served last year in the food pantries and soup kitchens, which is enough for every single person in the country to have gotten all their meals for 6 days, right? And we know how that looks. It looks like, about 1 in 10 Americans, white Americans, and about 1 in 10 Americans of color, and about 1 in 20 white Americans got emergency food assistance through the formal channels in 2020. And we know that about 43 million of our fellow citizens will have to turn to some form of charitable feeding in this year, right? That's where we're tracking for now. But what caught my eye, among other things, obviously the human stories behind those numbers are the real story and the big story and probably the more emotionally accessible story, but it hasn't seemed to come down much. So the recovery hasn't been enough yet for a lot of the folks who clearly were most in need of a recovery, because while we can find the occasional story and exaggerate it, you're probably not at a soup kitchen or a food pantry because you love a good deal, right? Probably there for another set of reasons. And so if the demand hasn't come off in those areas, in some cases there's some evidence it may have come up, then we have to ask a bunch of interesting questions. And one, I think, is things were so bad for so many people that maybe admitting things were bad and getting help, both the political discussion around that and the personal feeling around that might have changed. That's actually an important social advance, but it's something to acknowledge. And then I think more problematically, another big part of that story, which the numbers start to bear out, is if you were left behind or on the edge going into the pandemic, you've had one hell of a bad 14 months, and you're further away from having a full shot at the things people hope to have a shot at in their lives, from jobs to stable, decent housing, to the ability to have a little bit of savings, to the ability to feed yourself and the folks who count on you to feed them. And so I think part of what's happening is our attitudes about help have shifted, but unfortunately, we got a lot of folks who need help. And while some are doing better, and that is to be celebrated, not enough yet.
Well, with the stimulus, I'm going to ask you some very basic questions here, because many people have, well, if you listen to some, they believe that the stimulus really lifted people out of that. Did it?
Many people, yeah. So not everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but did the stimulus help make this less bad for a lot of people? Yes. Did it make it go away? Probably not, but it pushed back, right? It's a meal for a hungry person. You can't underestimate the importance, but a meal and a way to feed yourself are also not identical, right? So probably both deserve acknowledgement. Both need to be acknowledged. But yeah, I don't think we've begun a conversation about how to help people, but we've also started to see people get thrown off these roles pretty aggressively in a whole lot of states. And we've seen access to this federal assistance be kind of politicized. And we've seen a debate, which I'd also call out around this, which is that unemployment benefits or extended additional unemployment benefits and payments, and the supplemental nutrition programs, emergency nutrition programs, we need to cut those to get people back to work. And I realize this probably won't change anyone's mind, but just in case anyone cares, when we study throwing people off the assistance programs to put them back to work, it doesn't work.
What do you mean it doesn't work? What doesn't it do?
So it doesn't work. It doesn't get people to go back to work and some people for sure, and there are great stories, but on its own, losing your supports when you're very vulnerable doesn't inspire you to become the master of your own destiny. That's either already within you or it isn't. And having less resources, less help, and being more roughly treated by the people in the society around you actually doesn't make you do better. It's sort of a myth that we like, and there are circumstances and individuals for whom it works. These things are hard to generalize across tens or hundreds of millions of people, right? Obviously, personalities are quite variable, but on a social aggregate level, it doesn't actually work. It works really well to what it's probably designed to do, which is make people feel better about not helping each other. But it doesn't seem to work that well at helping people.
Well, what you say...
Now, it's also true that sometimes when you help people, it doesn't help them. Right? So the flip side that is a little bit more true is sometimes you help somebody, you give them something, it doesn't much help them. That is true. But taking the help away doesn't help them either, and it's even less effective. So we can't have the argument anymore that it works if we want to be kind of evidence-based.
Well, taking the help away from people who need the help hurts them. And I'd rather help people than hurt them. If someone gets some food and they've got extra food in their cupboard or in their pantry, take it. But to deny people food so they have nothing in their pantry, that's socially unsustainable. Not only is it cruel, that's not going to work, Dr. Wolf. We're talking with Dr. Maxwell, economist, about what's really going on with the recovery. A lot has been done, but it's not enough. Do we need universal basic income with a sustained, reliable income? Help people, Dr. Wolf. I'll give you an example. I worked at a place. I'll say Fox News, and when I got there, what was interesting is I've
heard of it.
Pundit there. I've been a pundit there for a few years, and what was shocking to me was you were paid every Thursday. I was like, whoa. And I asked Roger Ailes about that. He said, let me tell you something. And people have a lot to say about Roger Ailes, but I only have good things because I had a wonderful experience with him. And I had a lot of respect for him behind this. He said, look, I'm a ditch digger from Ohio. I didn't grow up with any money. I had to go work early. And I know that waiting 2 weeks for a paycheck can be too much. For not many people, but for most people. So I want to make sure that everybody here has a little something in their bank account every week, so that if you hit that dry patch, You have a little bit of water to get you through. Do we need to have something that is ongoing and sustaining so that people can have something that will get them through?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to experiment with that. I think there's a place for UBI, a universal basic income. I think we've seen that a lot of these sort of directed programs that are complicated and hard to get access to actually have a perverse effect. So a lot of the unemployment regimes and the assistance regimes we have, there was this idea that you should make it very difficult to get this aid. You know, lots of paperwork, no error tolerance, no help, easy to be thrown off the various roles and have to recertify yourself. I think what that does is stress and debilitate people into the point of feeling like getting these assistances is a job, the kind of is, and then they resent that, and it's stress and time and money that they don't spend to get a job. So I think lots of things we have this sort of Victorian idea of punishing indolence, right, which is mostly a social cover-up anyway. It's not terribly productive, but it just flat out doesn't work. So I think on the flip side, it's healthy and reasonable to demand a lot from people, but give a lot, get a lot is a way better model than give very little, get very little.
You know, I want to open it. I want to hear what the people on our panel are saying. Mark Fancher, what is your response? I mean, you're up in Michigan. Well, you know, we're seeing people are hurting everywhere, everywhere. What do you think about these numbers that show how many people needed food over this past year and a half? I mean, the supply couldn't keep up with the demand.
Yeah, well, I think the entire experience that we've had has been an excellent way to see the contradictions of the capitalist system. I mean, it's a ridiculous system. It's a vicious system. It's a heartless system. It makes absolutely no sense if you look objectively at what the needs of human beings are. Because, you know, in addition to treating human beings as objects, you know, to be maneuvered and manipulated according to the needs of capital and in accordance with the needs of those who have things, it also denies on another level the basic humanity of people. I mean, when a system gets to the point of having to make adjustments and contemplating, giving people, assistance, giving them money in order to sustain them, it doesn't even recognize the fact that human beings have a fundamental need to be productive, to be creative, to do things that allow them to generate what they need in order to sustain themselves. I mean, everybody does it. You know, even the people who are frequently pointed at and described as being a drag on society, people who are not contributing. These are very often people who, in their own way, are finding ways to be productive, very often in, ways which are destructive and negative. I mean, they may sell drugs, they may be pimps, they may be doing a lot of things, but they're engaged in some type of activity, which is generating things. So it makes a whole lot more sense in terms of, having an economic system that provides for people, to design it in such a way that everybody works. That that's part of the program. Everybody works, and you make sure that everybody has an opportunity to work and to make money. And socialism just makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, people have been saying it for years, but because capitalists dominate the economy and dominate the society, they continue to marginalize people who advocate that, describe them as crazy, as subversive, and all of these things. But it just makes sense. And it's long past the time that we just ought to reject the capitalist system, lock, stock, and barrel.
Robert Patillo?
Well, it's interesting because I was reading up on domino theory from the Cold War a couple of days ago, and part of the idea during the Cold War was that you had to fight in Korea, because if that failed, then a domino would start, and then other countries would fall to communism and socialism. We had to fight in Vietnam, because if you allow communism to get a foothold there, then everything else will fall thereafter. But then it hit me that If it was a bad thing, then why would you have to worry about people falling to it? If it was something that was innately evil, as they speak of, and then when you think about during the civil rights movement, whenever there was a group that was fighting for the rights of African Americans, they would immediately be labeled communist. And then you put it into the modern context that the minute you start talking about Black Lives Matter, you start talking about race and class in this country, they label it as Marxism because the people on the other side don't know the differences between any of these things. The reason they do this and they turn it into such a boogeyman is because they believe that the minute people have any idea of what the system actually entails, they'll like it and they'll want it and they'll call for it. And they like ideas like Social Security. They like ideas like Medicare and Medicaid. They like having Medicare Part D. If you take the title off it, they like Obamacare. They like the idea of not going bankrupt from the minute that you get sick. So we have a social structure in this country. We have a propagandized billionaire class that controls the media narratives. They control the educational curriculums. They control history classes. They control the lens of history that the students and young people get, and they consciously try to tamp down on any idea that isn't the traditional Anglo-Saxon Protestant work ethic, which is people who have money because they worked harder and God loved them more. People who don't have money because they're lazy and they're drags on society and they're to be shunned, and you're supposed to look at them with shame and disdain. And that, simply put, is not the reality of our system today. There's no way you can convince me that a Wall Street trader works any harder than a janitor or a day laborer. There's no way that you can convince me that someone who was born with a billionaire's spoon in their mouth has the same work ethic as somebody who had to drag themselves up. We talk a lot about bootstraps in the country. Someone who had to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps just to get to poverty. We forget that poverty is not just the baseline in this country. You can fall far below even poverty, and we have no intention as a country to do anything about it. This is part of the problem of late-stage capitalism, that at this point we are producing and consuming not based on need, but based on continuing to keep the market going. You can keep the same Toyota for 20 years if needed, but we have to keep you buying new ones because that's what keeps the auto industry going. So what we're going to have to start doing is reimagining and rethinking the way that we consider economics in this country, because the trajectory we're on currently is unsustainable. And we're no longer in a place where somebody can simply sit in their garage, sketch something on a board, and then turn it into $1 billion company overnight. Many of those arteries are broken. And for that reason, we're going to have to start creating more programs so we do not end up with serfdom in this country. We do not end up with plebiscites in this country. That we don't descend into feudalism, which appears to be the trajectory we're on currently. And until we can start having honest conversations about monetary and economic systems, we're going to continue to have a class structure where individuals at the bottom are simply there to keep the gears of the economy going, to feed the billionaires on the top. And when we see Jeff Bezos and his brother blast off to outer space next month, I think that's to be a signal to all of us that, well, maybe when Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson can all have their own private spaceships to go to space whenever they feel like, maybe the system's broken.
You know what? Let me beg your
Santita's on that.
That's why I want to be Robert Patillo when I grow up.
Yeah, Santita's got a seat on that shit. You're gonna make her nervous. She's one of the passengers.
Don't you pay any attention to that man? I'm gonna let these people ask these questions. Don't you pay attention to Dr. Wolf? Alan from Indiana. How are you, Alan?
I told her to auction it off to her loving audience and let them compete.
Alan dropped.
She said, "Don't mention it. I want to go. I love outer space." That's what I think is the paraphrase, but it's pretty close.
And I want to be with them. Ron from Naperville. Ron, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita.
Hey, Ron. I only have about a minute for you, so you go to it.
So, I didn't want to blow up the conversation, so I ranted at the fellow who picked up. But I marvel at what I, as a white guy, am asking my black and brown colleagues to do for me, and that is to fix something that basically, or my group of people destroyed. And we're asking it in a nasty way. You got to go out and get Joe elected. You got to go out, and if you don't get rid of McConnell, you've got to do this, because I'm just too busy. Honey, I'm just too busy to actually do anything because I'm comfortably numb. I need you to do it. Please go out there, kick the butt, get the people motivated, knock it out of the park for me so I can sit back and retire. And unfortunately, that's really the reality, I think it is. And it's really, I would use some words, but we're on radio, but it really whips me up that's the state of things. And 2035 can't get here fast enough for me when I am not the majority. At that point, I will laugh my butt off and say, kicking and screaming, I don't get, now I'm just another idiot in the boat of idiots. Hopefully someone knows how to drive it.
Well,
But, I'm just really sad and frustrated.
Look, let me tell you something. I'm not looking for a paradise that's black, white, brown, yellow, red. I'm looking for one that's just. Okay. I think that, the fact is the world has always been a world of color. Most people in the world are not white. Most people are not. My brother went to interview for a school when he was in high school, and the headmaster, he was so nice, and he said to my mother, we're so excited to have you all here, Jesse Jackson, and we're so happy, and blah blah blah, and we're going to show your son, how to be how to be how to stand for
how to be a white guy.
No, well, yeah, that too, but to be a minority in this world. And my mother ended the interview right there. She said, no. She said, most of the people in the world look like my son, so we're done. Thank you very much. And they left. But Dr. Wolf, the last 2 minutes belong to you. And Aaron, I'm going to get you right off there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are a lot of different things, right? And so they're white, they're black, they're left, they're right, they're rich, they're poor, they work hard, they don't, they're Christian, they're Muslim, they're atheist, they're whatever, right? So people are complicated. And so I think partly it's time to stop with the simple explanations and the simple solutions. It's part to look at the complexity of the people and the complexity of the circumstance. And I think the service that the past, in the form of the older folks who are in leadership position, owes the future, which is the younger folks, to make sure that they're not substantially without an opportunity. And I think what makes me most nervous more than any of the other big things we're used to talking about is the past has a vampire-like strangle on the future. True on the climate, true on the wealth, true on the elections, true on the voting, true on the spending of money, right? So we'll fight like hell about whether or not to give a 6-year-old kid with her whole life in front of her a piece of cheese, but we're okay with a $625,000 elective surgery for an 83-year-old. Right?
1 minute.
I think we have to start asking a lot of questions about the world we want to build and the election. And I think it's really important to ask them and to force the questions and to force the answers, but to do it with dignity. Because I also think if you frame things as us against them, you have needless fights, which are always destructive. And I don't know if you win them either. So I don't even know that it carries the most water for the cause. But I think at the end of the day, if people can see their humanity in someone else, you can work with them. And if they can't, you can't. Right? But that people are complicated. They're gay, they're straight, they're old, they're young, they're educated, they're uneducated, they're paranoid, they're not paranoid, they're in pain, they're not in pain, they're hungry, they're fed. There are a lot of things. And to me, a lot of the brutalities of the past, the ethnics, the religious, the lifestyle, the sexual orientation, the gender, is about reducing someone to one thing and then making that lesser. But I think when you reduce the complexity of an individual to one thing, you've already done an act of violence, even if you think you're being kind. So I think it's sort of time to grow up, right? For a young country to at least get into its adolescence and hope to at least manage what appears to be the early onset of a serious psychiatric disorder in its adolescence. And I think until we do that, all the rest of the big ideas, compelling who they are, we'll have a hard time finding fertile soil for them to root and grow.
Amen to that. And there we are. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show on Santita Jackson and Friends. Going to get some closing thoughts from John's mother, also known as Attorney Erin Connolly. Closing thoughts from you, Attorney Fancher, and you, Attorney Patel, and of course you, Dr. Maxwell. Thank you, Paul. Great show, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you, love you, love you. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Does Erin, John's mom, I know you got to run.
Yes, I do. You know my time.
I know, but I wanted you to get some closing thoughts. I'm sorry I was running up against that clock.
No, absolutely. That was a really important segment, and I think the one thing I will add is just give people cash. We've seen the data in Sacramento from wonderful women like Aisha Nyandro in Mississippi, who run Magnolia Mothers Trust. When people have money, they spend it on the things they need. It takes out the trauma. It takes out the stress. It takes out the system that has been oppressing you, right? Like, because when you're given a program or a grant or something like this, just give people money without hoops. It will work. And to take it away from them,
it's cheaper.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That cost benefit point is something that I would love some of these foundations and larger groups to dig into, because we want to tell people what to do. In many cases, the support is about control. It's not about empowerment, right? Mm-hmm. So programs where we're giving cash, where we're giving people other tools without these hoops, right? Whether it's childcare reimbursements or something they don't have to think about, then you have space to think and create and, you know, have ideas about the company that you wanted to start, or have a little capital to start that small business and test it out, right? And that's the thing that drives innovation and hope. And ultimately, that's what will create an economic engine for this country. If we just pull the rug out from everyone, I think that just adds to the trauma. And I'm just making my shameless plug for some version of UBI. If we're going to have family values, we really have to support families. It's common sense, right? Come on.
Well, that's not shameless. Plug away. Plug away. I mean, no, seriously. Because I just think that, you know, we're cheap about the things that matter, and we are greedy and generous about the things that don't. We feed greed and we starve people, and I don't understand that. I just, and it's not
these are
sustainable.
choices.
Oh, these are choices, and we're making horrible choices.
These are choices.
And you know what? And we're living with them. And look at what we've got. People shooting each other. We're doing all kinds of things because people have had enough. Now, I'm not justifying all, you know, killing people and all that. But I know, look, when, you know what? I have a fair amount of comfort in my life. Number one, I'm not going home to I have something to eat today. And I'm not going home to anyone I don't like. And who I don't like, who has no money either. I mean, it's all of that. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, wait a minute, you guys.
I thought you weren't going to bring up my family. But we're friends.
We are. You know what? You understand, Max? I'm trying to keep my face.
You guys, your producer promised. I mean, I feel a little bit like I know you need to get that space trap, but you didn't have to say it all.
You know, he knows I'm my own producer. Ain't that nothing? Talking about me not being nice, but that's it. You know, it's like, and so when Max wanted to bring this to our attention today. He's been sending me stories about this all week because, you know, this is where we live. This is where economics really does make sense. This is where policy makes sense. People are starving out here. They are still. I mean, and I think President Biden has done a lot. Thing is, he's got to do more, and we have to push him to do more. The only way that he can get things done is
look, we did $1 billion block grant. Yeah, to be fair, there was $1 billion block grant to the emergency food system, and I think it kept a lot of mouths above the waterline, right? So I'm not trying to not be calling that out and being appreciative. I think both are important. I think, you know, particularly folks who are critics and who are progressive, they have a tendency to always ask for what they're not getting because it's so big. But you don't sustain the politicians who give you what you want by just critiquing them. Critique is a pretty watery diet, right? So you have to appreciate as well. But, you know, I do think there's just the hole they're trying to fill in is pretty big.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's where everybody, Priscilla, I hear you, Carol, Daryl, DG, Rombo, Kenneth, Jewel, Carol, I mean, just everybody. You got to call your representatives. I don't care whether you voted for them or not, because whether they are Republican, Democrats, or independents, they represent you. At the end of the day, whether you liked it or not, Donald Trump was your president, and you had every right and every obligation to lobby him to get what you need. I don't care who's sitting in the seat. They represent you. You pay them. Make them work for you. So call Susan Collins up in Maine. I need you to vote for this. The infrastructure bill, yeah, we need it. And women and families and fathers need health need child care. We need help. Because guess what? The billionaires, I'm sounding like Bernie Sanders, the billionaires and the millionaires, they're all getting their breaks. And that's fine. They're lobbying for themselves. Now you lobby for you and support the organizations and the structures that lobby for you. The civil rights organizations, the human rights organizations, the civil liberties organizations, support them because they're supporting you and they cannot do it alone. You don't need to be silent about what you need. You need to speak up and speak out. Um, are you still there, Mark Fancher?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, because I wanted you and Robert to be able to get your final thoughts in before we go.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess the only thing I have left to say is that if you give me a car and it has, fatal defects and flaws, and I try and drive that car, I hang on to that car, it's going to drive me crazy because I'm constantly trying to tinker with it, trying to fix this, fix that, trying to get this thing to work when it just never really was in a condition that it would work anyway. And I think that that's what we have with respect to a lot of these systems and institutions that we've been living with, over the years. And in the same way that we just have to finally break down and get rid of that car and get a new one, we need to get rid of these things because so many of the problems that seem so difficult, seem so challenging, are challenging and difficult only because we're trying to fix them using a flawed and defective system. The immigration problem is really not a problem at all if we step back and acknowledge the fact that that border that everybody is so concerned about is one that does not belong there. That it was put in place after the U.S. entity conquered a lot of territory, pushed a lot of people who should be there back behind it, and began to claim it as theirs. So, to me, the idea of just eliminating the border, in fact, integrating the entire Western Hemisphere economically and politically makes a lot of sense to me. Under the guidance of the indigenous peoples, the people who were here first. And you do that, you eliminate all of these problems about borders because there are none. And so a lot of these things are very simple to solve if we just, can bring ourselves collectively to the point of just fundamentally rejecting everything we've been living with up to now and just starting all over.
Robert Patillo?
Well, the interesting thing from this conversation that I thought of was last time I was in London, I was speaking with someone, and they had kind of a Cockney accent, and they said a word that I'd never heard before, a word bodging. And so I asked them what it meant. They said it's kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole, where you kind of make a mess of something, you just kind of try to bodge it together. And that's what we're trying to do often with our with many of these systems that we've put in place that simply don't work. Instead of just tearing it down and building back up again, we just try to bond something together to get us through to the next week, to the next day, to the next hour, and then we'll kick the can down the road. Many of these systems that are in place currently, we simply assume that they have always been there because that's the only thing they've ever told us has been there. But in reality, there's no reason that we can't take the entire system, dismantle it, and rebuild it in a better way. Instead of making a better horse and buggy, make a better car. Instead of simply trying to fix the broken immigration system, we have to reimagine the way that the system of immigration works. We have to stop thinking about it in a medieval context of trying to keep the Anglo-Saxons out of Sussex we have to think about it more so. Okay, we have people who live in a tropical paradise, but they need to work in America. So let's create a system where they can come here and work and then go back home and then come back as work is needed. Canada is facing the issue of having a massively declining population and not enough people there to fill up the country. They have massive areas of completely empty areas, and Trudeau has said he wants more people. Central America has a bunch of people who have no place to go. Let's get some people going to Canada. There's ways to reimagine these things if we actually want to work through them, but the truth is the powered, moneyed interests have no inclination towards fixing the problem. The money is in keeping the problem going. If you wanted to end the narco-terrorists tomorrow, you would just legalize drugs in America, and then Walgreens would sell them, and the whole cartels would be done. They'd be bankrupt just like we did Jimmy Hoffa and the mob. So until we start reimagining and thinking through these issues and having some form of political courage, we're always going to have these problems, which is why you have to encourage people to think, encourage people to read, encourage people to learn, and encourage people to advocate.
Does anyone, well, Dr. Wolf, I'm going to let you close this out. This is your segment every Thursday.
Yeah, I think people should see if they're ready to donate into the Send Santita to Space program. We don't have a URL yet, but I think we should get her on there, and we should do a show on that just to keep it real, even intergalactically. I think it's important. Can't really think of anything better to do with my time since I have a small number of ideas, which are probably shop-worn and mediocre on a good day. But I'll reheat a few of them just so I won't let you down. But look, I do think, well, 2 seats might be twice as expensive unless there's a group discount, which I'm into. But look, I think that we are asking the wrong questions a lot of the time, but I think we've started talking about the right problems. And to me, that is actually progress. Maybe painfully slow, maybe too slow for some. I understand that. But I do think it's something there. And I do think we do need to begin to have some kind of reconciliation between who we tell people we are and who we are. And the only way to do that, which is always good on a lot of levels, is to start to make sure that priorities come through in the budgets and the taxing, what we tax and what we spend on. And I think we kind of do have to get to the starting block of thinking that the younger people and the folks in need in our country are a good investment. I think until we do that, the rest of these conversations, while meaningful and interesting and potentially inspiring, will have a hard time taking root.
I agree. I mean, look, I close as I opened. My pastor, Reverend Clay Evans, God rest his soul, he said, I've never seen God make a mouth he couldn't feed. I've never seen God have a vision without making provision. Everybody who's on this earth is supposed to be here. And we have something that we are supposed to be doing. It is a sin, a grievous sin for us to stand in the way of or thwart human potential. And we do that every day when we deny people food, clothing, shelter. You can put any label on that you wish. But God has put enough on this earth for everybody to have food, clothing, and shelter, and it could be decent. If you're going to be wealthy and if you're going to have more, that's great. But a baseline, a floor beneath which no human being should fall, that's been established. You are an expression of God's vision. You are. And you deserve access to the best health care. Everybody ought to be able to get into a Mayo Clinic. We need to have Mayo Clinics everywhere, and Cleveland Clinics, and Mount Sinai's, and Boston Generals, and on and on and on. I felt Jimmy Kimmel when he was crying as he had a child who was born ill. He said, no one should have to make the choice. He said, I can afford to pay for my child to have these heart surgeries, but most people cannot. That's not right. That's not right. And you should not wait until you feel empathy, until it happens to you before you can feel some sympathy for somebody else. Grow up, everybody. You are that somebody else, because if you live long enough, you or somebody you love, it's going to happen to them. So let's start asking the right questions, and let's start digging down, and let's create a more perfect union. In fact, let's create a perfect union. Let's do that. We're all here now. However we got here, we're all here. So we need to figure it out. And the people you're trying to block, they call America El Norte, because this is where they're from. They're indigenous people who speak Spanish. What? Grow up. Okay? Let's share. and let us talk to the indigenous people on whose land we sit and we have settled. Got to start respecting people. Oh, I'll go back to the color purple, Mark and Robert and Aaron and Max. Seeley put it so well. Until you do right by me, everything you think about gonna crumble. And until we do right by the people we've wronged, everything we think about is going to come apart. But we can go another way, and we need to if we want to thrive, not merely survive. I love you, everybody. I love you, Max, Mark, Aaron, and who did I miss? Robert Patillo. Robert Patillo, all y'all. I love you. I love you. And I've got to put Paul in that. Thank you for a great show. Thank you, Morning Stars. Hey, 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 everybody. Get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. Get registered to vote. Check and see if you are still on the voter rolls, and ask and encourage your friends to do the same. Your voting rights, your ability to vote is being impeded as we speak wherever you are. Check it out, everybody, because people were purged in Chicago. Yeah. All of that. I love you, everybody. Max, Mark, Robert, Aaron, Paul, I'm out of here. I love you. See you tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show.